Hi everyone, this is Kathy McAllister of Teawife Creations. I wanted to share this new tutorial with you today. It's based on an art project called Bunny Butt in the Truck, which is this right here. And it's perfect for Easter. It features the Easter Bunny who's diving into the back of a good old farm truck to grab some of his favorite things, eggs and carrots. And you can buy this laser cut wood kit from my Etsy shop, Teawife Creations, and paint and make this artwork for yourself. I've made two different videos for this art project. This one is the technique-driven tutorial that demonstrates how to dry brush and shade the various elements on the project. The other video is an easier one that discusses how to sponge and brush. It's a lot faster. So I also wanted to mention that the original artwork for this bunny butt in the truck was created by Diva Watts Designs, who also has an Etsy shop that's full of all kinds of wonderful digital images. So I invite you to go over there and have a look. But if you're interested in this project and you want to buy the blank wood laser cut pieces, head over to my shop, Teawife Creations, and you can purchase this. Thank you so much for stopping in and watching. I hope you enjoy this tutorial. So this is the bunny butt truck. Apparently bunny butts are all the rage. And this shows you what the finished piece looks like. And the tutorial that follows will show you what I did to paint it. When you purchase this piece in my Etsy shop, it comes as plain wood blanks that you paint and then piece together, layer together to create this final piece. So I have base coated everything, and you can see I have all the layers here. So I did the primary truck color in Victorian blue. So next I am going to take Moody blue and dry brush, and then I'll use baby blue as a final dry brushing. These Dynasty Mezzaluna brushes are my absolute favorite for dry brushing. This is the extra large since I've got a large space, so I'm going to use that. And we are starting with Moody blue, since, as I said, the base is Victorian blue. So, as dry brushers know, you always buy a huge supply of paper towels. So Costco, Sam's Club, yes, they get a lot of my paper towel business. And the process is, as it says, you're trying to work with as much of a dry brush as you possibly can. If you're in a hurry and you end up having a brush that's too wet, it will really affect your final piece. So you have to be somewhat disciplined with yourself to get as much of the paint off as possible, which seems like kind of a waste of paint, but hey ho, that's the way the process works. So some people do dry brushing this way, and there's others who like more of a stippling effect, which is more like this. I tend to use a combination of, depending on the size of the area that I'm working on and what I want as my final result. So I just kind of play around with it. I mean, you know, want some of your original paint to come through as well, but it's really more of a layering process of paint. So the bottom layer will still come through, but it provides more depth to your image in the end. And like, you tend to do more of your, on this truck, the back of the truck, you want to keep the edges a little bit darker and more of the brightness will be wherever you can imagine that the sun is reflecting off of. So it's just a process of laying down color and coming back and laying down more color. Now see, I think that was probably a little bit too wet of a brush, but we'll try to just blend it in. And we have the letters here, so anything you do in here is going to be covered up with your little letters, so that are going to be glued down. Man, these things are fiddly. This is just, I think it's a plywood. It could be a basswood, but it doesn't have a lot of graining to it. So you're not going to get a lot of interesting effects when you dry brush. Sometimes if you have a really nice grainy wood and you're brushing across like this, you'll pick up some of the lovely graining, but this is just, you know, like I said, basswood and plywood. And there's nothing very special about the wood, except that it makes really good pieces for laser cutting. And as I come over here, you don't have to worry too much on the leaves because you're going to be covering that up. But places where you won't have layers, like the windshield, you want to be a little bit more careful around those areas. All right, so that's starting to get more the color I want, but it's still kind of dark. Now, if you're not into dry brushing and you just don't want to mess with it, I would suggest just starting with a lighter color for the car, and then getting some dimension from using your floating or your shading around the edges. Now here, top of the car, maybe I want that to be a little bit wetter because I want some of the more bright color of the paint to come through. All right, so that's kind of helped a bit. We're going to go the next color, which is baby blue. And when you're dry brushing, you don't want to wet your brush in water. So basically you're using the other color to clean your brush. But in this case, you don't want to take too much of the other color out because you're going from one shade to the next. And it doesn't have to be straight baby blue. So if some of the moody blue gets in on that, that's fine. All right. So, but you want to use as dry of a brush as possible. And if you go and wash your brush and you've got a damp brush, and it won't make your paint behave correctly. It'll be too wet on the surface. It's a little bit wetter, and again, kind of feel like I want slightly more lightness on the roof and the sides there. So I'm actually using slightly wetter acrylic as I go around of the baby blue. And it's really up to you to determine how light you want the vehicle to be, you know. Okay, I think I'll go around it again. And so now, as I clean off the brush, more and more of the baby blue's coming out, and there's really no moody blue that's left in it. And if you know your brush is going to be a little bit wetter when you first come off the paint, think about the areas where you want lighter paint, like in the middle here, as opposed to out to the edges. And then as the brush starts to dry a little, you can take it out to the edges more. So in a sense, with the dry brushing, if you keep it off the edges to some degree, you can see you're kind of creating your own kind of shading. I'm going to come back with to float and shade. However, you might like the look without float or shade if you use dry brushing, and this becomes your shading, the darker color you can see. Okay, I'm kind of liking that. And you can certainly go back in and change it up after you let it sit a while. So, and the other thing is when you're dry brushing, remember too, you don't want to go and start dry brushing if the previous layer isn't dried. But because we're working on a bigger piece here, that shouldn't be an issue. And because the paint is pretty dry when we're putting it on, so it shouldn't be really an issue. But you can keep going and messing with it until the cows come home, because you're always going to see something that you want to change. All right, I'm going to use the Dynasty Black Gold 1/2 inch to do some shading. But you can see on this that there's some areas that are already kind of highlighted. I mean, not highlighted, shaded darker. And this area up here, where you would imagine like the sun bouncing off and reflecting, you don't want to do a dark shade here. So we're just gonna put it in strategic places and see if we like it. So the other thing I do, for some reason, the tap water I have here, whenever I use it for my shading and floating, it tends to leave like a mineral deposit. So one of the artists that I follow had recommended this Jo Sonja fast drying glaze medium to use instead of water. And so now I don't really have as much of an issue with, you know, a mineral line, a water line being left. And also, when you do it, you might want a mop brush. This is Lori Spelt's Cha-Cha brush, which this end kind of fixes boo-boos that you might make with the paint. And then this is a mop end that you can use when you're doing your shading and your floating. So those are handy tools. And initially I get all of my brush wet and then I dry it off. And then let me see if I can't get into, well, did a bit. So I'm dipping just my angle into the Jo Sonja medium, and then I'm dipping just a little bit of it into the color, and I've chosen Deep Midnight Blue. Okay. And then, of course, you condition it. So, let's see about putting it in there. So dip the edge, dip into the paint. Well, I can't talk today. Condition it on your palette paper. Bring it over here. Okay. And I think having it along the edge here probably is a good idea too. So if you're able to get a bit in here, you could use a smaller brush in here too. And hopefully we can fix, if it comes into the windshield, we can fix that with, we're going to do a zinc in here, and hopefully that will fix that issue. So this looks perfect for adding in shading here. And we're going to go around the feet as well. And remember, this is going to be covered up, so if you go into the carrots or the leaves or the tails, that's fine. It's kind of an interesting bit. I think I'll probably bring this across because this is where the roof kind of meets the body of the car. And since there is a built-in line there, it seems to be a good place to continue the shade. All right, I think I will go around the feet of the bunny. And again, if you get it into the bunny foot, the rabbit foot, it does not matter because it's going to be covered up. Unless your gluing is not very accurate and you leave a lot of edges. All right. Seems like when you're floating, shading, you're spinning your artwork around 100 million times. It's like you just can't shade in one direction. You kind of have to spin your art piece. Yeah, another thing I noticed with the Jo Sonja glaze medium is I don't have to do as much mopping. When I was using water, that it always looked like a harsh line, and I would mop over the areas I was shading so it wouldn't be as distinctive of just a line. You wanted it to be a smoother finish, but I don't get that as much with this medium. So I really do like it. And you really only use a small amount on your project. So it isn't like, oh my gosh, I've used the whole bottle for one project. Nope. Just use a wee bit. So that's kind of what that looks like. I'm doing two at once, so you can kind of see what it looks like without having come in and done the float. And I might want to come back and do more. I don't know. I'll think about it. I did the tires in Payne's Gray.
just a slightly different color than going straight black. And I'm going to do some dry brushing in zinc. And the treads are in slate gray, so they're pretty light. So I want to come back and do some dry brushing over the tire treads. Okay, so this time I kind of want to do it on the edges coming in. Well, you can do the whole thing, but all right, so the fender, you have a separate piece for that. So what we want to do, because most of the dry brushing is going to be done on this piece, what we want to do is some shading in here. Okay, so we are going to use some, oh, good question. What color are we going to use on that? Zinc, I guess, because Payne's is just too dark, so we're going to use zinc for shading. Now, if you wanted to do something different and somewhat easier, you can always use metallic, like a chrome silvery color on the bumper fender. Now, I'm doing this underneath, but of course that's going to be covered up, so hey, won't actually show there. But I'm going with the lighter gray now for highlighting. So whatever lighter gray you have, you can use that on this. So again, we're just trying to give it a bit of a metallic sheen with creating an illusion with lighter colors. But if you wanted to, you could just do it in metallic over the top of this, or you could dry brush some metallic, and we're going to try that too, just to see what it looks like. Okay, so that gives you an idea of a little bit of sheen created with the lighter gray. Okay, so what would happen then if I used a bit of white on there for dry brushing? But you gotta really, really, really get your brush dry when you use white. Just really dry. And there will still be gray in there as well. And you're just kind of gonna go over and think about how the sun would be reflecting off the back of the bumper and blinding the person behind you who's driving. I don't know if you've ever had that happen. The sun hits someone's bumper just right. Yeah. And we'll come in with some highlights of white too, with a very narrow round brush or liner brush or something later. Okay, so we're going to use a bit of zinc for shading around the edges. And if your brush is too wet, you can dab it off. You don't want your shading brush, oops, I just used the wrong color. You don't want your shading brush to be too wet. I know some artists, after they condition the brush, they will drop it down on the napkin just to get any excess moisture off. So we're going to use similar colors on the windscreen on the back, windscreen. Ugh. I lived in England for 10 years and I never can remember. There's terms that are English and there's terms that are American. And I use them interchangeably, and sometimes my friends look at me like I'm weird, which I am. Okay, so we're using similar colors. So we're going, this was originally the slate gray, and we're going to use a lighter gray. And again, I don't have the right Americana colors to tell you. I think if you have the Americana colors, then you want to use Gray Sky, which I don't own, and I need to. Yes, I need to go and buy it. So, however, the deco art people have gotten so much of my of my business lately. Ugh. Plus, I've been replenishing some of my old brushes. And I've been using a company out of California that Lori Speltz recommended called The Brush Guys. And they were really great because I hadn't a clue, you know, what brands to try. I knew what I had previously. Some of my brushes were, oh gosh, how old? 40? 40? No, they couldn't be that old. They were like 25 years old. Yeah, 25 years old. And yeah, kind of needed a few new brushes, and I was getting some less expensive ones, and I wasn't happy with the way that the bristles were behaving. And so I was watching all the artists out there and seeing what they were using. And like I said, I absolutely love these Mezzaluna ones for dry brushing. And one of the brushes that I really like, it's a brand, it's called Monza, and it is a synthetic mongoose. Just, I love these products. Oh, I just love them. Those are a little bit more pricey than some of the black gold, which is what a lot of the decorative art people like to use. But anyway, I've been buying way too many brushes. Too much paint, too many brushes. So we're just trying to get the windshield to look a little bit more like glass. So you kind of want it to be not like solid. You kind of want it to have a little bit of reflection spots. And again, remember that you're layering over the top of this. So yeah, that's kind of looking a little bit better. Okay, and then I'm going to use a bit of white, but not a lot of it, just a little bit of it strategically. And again, you keep the same brush because you're going from gray, mixing it with white. It's kind of the next step. Instead of going, you know, straight from gray to white. Yeah, kind of like that. That's starting to look more like a windshield. Okay. So now we need to do lining again. And that is zinc that we're using again. Not lining. Floating. Duh. But everybody's been talking about bunny butts. I'm like, really? What? Bunny butts? What are you talking about, bunny butts? Yeah, you know, bunny butt hanging out the window, huh? Well, when I was growing up in high school, we used to call that something else, but hey-ho. Yeah, hanging your butt out a car window could get you into a lot of trouble when you were a teenager. I don't know what teenagers do anymore. So even though I'm filming this and I'm talking to you, I do usually talk to myself when I paint. So it's kind of nice to be able to talk to somebody else instead of just myself. I don't feel quite so crazy. Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, if it's not perfect, that's almost better sometimes. You don't want it to be exact. Yeah, I like it. So I wanted you to see, this is what it was before we did all the dry brushing and the shading. And now this is what it is. So you can see the difference. Maybe, there we go. So, and in real life, it always looks different than it does when you're doing a video of it, but it gives you the idea. So now on to the carrots. They originally were done in spiced pumpkin. So we're going to dry brush with bright orange. And then we're going to move to saffron yellow. If I need to go lighter, I have bright yellow over there as well. And I probably will shade with cinnamon stick, but I haven't 100% made up my mind on that. Also, I did look up on Silhouette that the artist who did the original creation of this bunny butt art, her name is Diva Watts Design. Diva Watts. Okay. I used to do a lot of classes. So this is the bright orange. I used to do a lot of craft classes in places where we lived around the world. So I had a really popular class when we lived in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East. And I also had a class when we were in England that we'd call it Craft and Chat. So basically you would come, you would do your craft, and you'd have some tea because we were in England. But ironically, everybody seemed to drink coffee. There were very few tea drinkers at my Craft and Chat, even though there were, you know, a lot of Brits that were there. And they'd say, no, I'll have an espresso or a latte. Like, okay. I drink tea. Hence, my business is called Teawife Creations, like a wife who drinks tea. It's an Irish endearment, a tea wife. A tea wife is someone who kind of sits around or stands around or gets together with her friends, her female friends, and chats about the weather or what the neighbor's up to, or shares a story, or helps the other person out. Anyway, a lot of us are tea wives. We help each other out, and we kind of know what we're all up to. So moving on to the saffron yellow, it's the bright orange. It's kind of just soaking into the color of the spiced pumpkin there. It's not doing as much as I was hoping. Yeah, that's a little bit more dimension. I think it needs even more. I'm going to try some of the bright yellow. And now I live in Colorado, and I used to teach classes here too, but hey, it all went away when that horrible thing happened, that pandemic. And I haven't gotten back to teaching in-person classes again. I did a lot of my classes were paper crafting, cards, scrapbooking, and then I got heavy into mixed media. That's one of my favorite things, which is probably why when I do painting, I have to layer everything. It's a compulsion. Everything, there's got to be, 3D, 2D, everything needs to be stacked because I love mixed media. I love the way that it looks. It's kind of hard for me to just do flat artwork. So now we're going to shade. And like I said, I'm using cinnamon stick. We'll see how that goes. I've got a few extra pieces here because I'm doing the 2 at a time. Ooh, that's way too wet. Whoopsie. Use that mop brush. So you're just going around the edges. So the mop brush is great for taking away delineated lines. They're just too strong, but it's also, if you've got some extra paint where you don't want it, you can mop it away like it never was there. You got to find that happy medium, because if you don't have enough liquid, whether it's water or a medium like I'm using, then of course the brush doesn't pull. You want it to pull across the surface, and if you have too much, it just makes a mess. I seem to have more trouble with the carrots than I have with the other bits. Okay, so that's the edges, but we want to put in the carrot grow lines as well. So you want to make sure that that's all nice and dry before you come in. And you certainly could use a darker shade than cinnamon stick if you want to go darker brown. You could use a liner for this. You don't have to use a shader. So just kind of coming in where you would imagine the grow lines. All right. So now we're going to do some more dry brushing. See if I can find one of my smaller dry brushes. Oh, that's too small. That's better. That one is a medium dry brush. Okay, so I'm going to just make sure everything's nice and dry there. All right, so we're going to try some more saffron yellow, and this is going to be more of a stippling effect. And if you don't have something that has these really stiff bristles like you get on the Mezzaluna, I mean, I know that there's other brushes you can find out there, but you really need, if you're doing something like stippling, you can't have a soft bristle. You have to have something that stands up to the job. Now, the problem with all dry brushes is they don't last forever because you beat the bristles up. Especially when I used to do ceramics. That was just, you know, like almost like sandpaper, glass, whatever. That the bristles just broke. And you want, you know, you want fairly short bristles to start with because otherwise you don't get the stiffness. All right, so that is a little bit more dynamic. And now I'm going to use a little bit of bright yellow. I realize not all painters are really big into dry brushing, but I guess because of my background starting in painting ceramics, and I'm talking about painting bisque, not doing greenware and glazes and all that, but actually painting onto bisque with acrylics, that you use a huge, dry brushing is your primary technique that you use to paint. After you do your base coat, everything is dry brushed onto ceramics, onto bisqueware. And I think that's probably why I incorporate a lot of dry brushing into my decorative painting. Yeah, I like that. So now you can see this is what the carrots look like now that they've been dry brushed. And you can see what they used to look like. So, coming along. And we're going to use the cinnamon stick on the outside for shading, on the outside of the lights. We do have pieces that go over the top, and we have to dry brush those and do those. So we are going to use cinnamon stick and just kind of go around the edges. All right, moving on to the carrot tops. Oh, where are my reading glasses? Can't do this without them. Okay, there we go. And I went ahead, you know, you're like, should I keep the lines in there? Should I not keep the lines in there? But I did keep them in the design. So all of these have been painted in the very bright festive green. Okay, and now we're moving into Hauser light green, and we're going to do more dry brushing. gonna go away from this video. How many times did that woman say dry brushing? Okay, so I have washed this a couple of times now because we've gone through different colors. So once you do that, your brush is going to be damper. So you might need to spend more time drying it off with the paint. Wasting the paint as usual. Okay. So we're kind of going to do an all over dry brush, even though there's these lines that are in the carrot tops. And we will use those lines probably to do more like a yellowy tone. But we want the Hauser light green to be kind of all over-ish. And also it will show up different because we are going to shade all these edges as well with the antique green, which is pretty dark. So that's going to be our shading color. Yeah, there it is. All right. Ooh, got a little bit too much wetness going on there. I got dog hair on me. Ugh. Dog hair everywhere. I have an English Shepherd, and he's very hairy. So an English Shepherd, if you're wondering what that is, think of a form collie. They're very, very cute and sweet and lovely. Ugh, I love my doggie. All right, so we're going to use the antique green again. Oops, there it is. The antique green to do shading. I just hate when this happens. Doesn't that just drive you to distraction? And errand that's forced into it because we're up in the mountains or near the mountains. We're, 5,500 feet up here. So my paint just seems to pop out like that. Okay, so I don't know if I want to lose all of the festive green that was in there because it's awfully pretty. So there's that really bright festive green. I think I kind of like a combination of, and I probably will come back and shade in a highlight of yellow there. And again, you could just use a liner for this. You don't need to like shade it in. So here are the bits of eggs. You can use any colors you want. These are the color combinations I used. I'd probably use something different tomorrow, depending on what my mood is. But so this started out as Perfect Perry, base coated, and now we're moving on to Purple Cow. Okay, so the darker one was painted in mulberry. I was going to show you mulberry, but I've lost it. Mulberry. And then we're going to dry brush with vivid violet. think after I have the eggs glued into place, I'll see about how I want to shade it, how I want to highlight it. And kind of, I'll have a better feeling for that, because it gives you a feeling once it's in situ, what direction you're imagining the sun coming down, and painting it as pieces like this. Yeah, so I'll do that after I've glued it down. Okay, so these are carousel pink, and we're going to come back with bubblegum pink. So once again, I have the other color in here, which is fine. I mean, as long as it's not too much of the other color. All right, so the eggs are as done as they're going to be for right now. I will revisit them later. So these pieces were base coated in antique white. This is the bunny body. And we're going to use a combination for dry brushing of warm white, light buttermilk, and baby blush, with the tail probably being the lightest part of all of it. So I think I'll start with the tail, and I'm gonna start with white, the warm white. And again, like if you wanted your bunny just to be white and just variation of white, you could have done that instead of starting it out with more of a tanny color like I did. This antique white ended up being a lot more tan than I was kind of expecting. So I think I'll go to light buttermilk on that. So I'm going to go back to doing more white on the tail. I don't think I'm going to use any buttermilk on the tail because it needs to be white and fluffy. So I was trying to get the colors a little bit closer to match. So I used a little bit more light buttermilk to make this lighter. And then after I have it in place, after it's glued in place, I'm going to think about doing these in shades of pink, but I'm not 100% sure yet how it's going to look. And once it's glued in place, you might, want to lighten everything up again. It's kind of hard to tell on video what color it actually is. It's one of these things that when you take a photo of it, it's a lot clearer, I think, on the shade of the shades. So I will finish that in place after it's glued in. We have these little bits too that are part of the car tires that we'll see if we need to do anything with. And then I used all kinds of colors to do happy. So that's most of the dry brushing and most of the shading, but I'm going to do more, and I'll come back. So I went back into these pieces and I added in a lot more warm white and light buttermilk, and then came back with baby pink and baby blush, and then I shaded with cocoa. So it's looking more like I was hoping for. So there we go. The shading on the video is showing up a lot darker than it is in real life, because it's just a kind of a light sort of tea stained shading. So that is ready to go on. So on the rabbit foot, I want to go ahead and make the pink a little stronger. So this is all dry brush, done with dry brush technique. And I want to make this a little pinker. So it's, oops, baby pink. If I can get this in the right place, that would be good. There we go, baby pink. And I have decided I just don't like this flat purple. So I am going to use a metallic. It is by Art Alchemy, redesigned by Prima Art Basics. Don't be doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this area here in this metallic, and I just think it will be a little bit snazzier. I feel like this needs something else. We had used a bit of cinnamon stick, and it just seems to have like disappeared, but just need a little brightness here. So I'm going to dry brush the backlights with oranges and yellows. I want to keep the shading to just one side. And then when I glue it on, I'll just remember both of the elements need to be on my left. And then on the opposite side to where I'm working, whoops, that was too much. I'm putting just a little bit more yellow tones. I'm going to finish up by shading on the edges of the eggs. So Royal Fuchsia is going there. Purple Rain and very light amount of zinc. I don't want the zinc to overwhelm, but I don't have anything that's overly darker than that. All right, so Purple Rain. I'm also going to add in some more highlights to my eggs. Just a little bit more brightness. And now I'm going to just start gluing down some of these pieces. And that will give me the ability to see if I need to start doing my highlights and more shading and floating. So I'll see you on the other side. So you can see that I have glued all the layers down now. And this helps to allow you to look at the piece and see what you need to finish. So these are kind of rounding up the finishing pieces. The license plate I'm still working on. So I will just run the video while I try to touch up items. So the tail was done with dry brush stippling, if you recall. And I was just curious what it would be like to do some little pinwheels with pink and white. And so I'm just going to see what it looks like. Try this metallic on the word Easter, since So this is the other piece I have. And I think I will also use the metallic paint on it. When you're painting these pieces that are so fragile like this, make sure that you don't brush too hard or pull, because you will break the words. They're really, really delicate. Well, that was a lot easier to do that than to do that. Okay. So you can see the two. I really, really like that. It's harder to see on the video how really pretty and blue that is. There we go. Something like that. Anyway, I really like that. I'm going to use some slate gray to go around and shade this. So I might come back with some crystal glitter around the some of the area in here. I haven't decided yet. And this one now looks like that. I'm going to add glitter here. So I have a two-way pen because I don't really want the glitter to be too thick and heavy. If you're using a tacky glue or art glitter glue or whatever, it can be too heavy. Whereas this, literally any little area that you touch, the glitter will adhere, but very lightly. And I'm just using a white crystal glitter that has, the glitter is very fine. So it's just enough to give it a little sparkle and interest. It's amazing how much you don't see it on the video camera. But believe me, it's there, and it's just enough. And then I'll do the same with this. So just a little bit of glitter. Now I'm going to stick down Easter, the word there. And this I will use my art glitter glue because I want it to be thicker and adhere. I like them both. And the wood pattern that I'm selling of this will give you the option to do either or. So you can make your own decision. So the bumper has warped up a little bit right here in the middle, so I'm gonna hold it for a little while. So I feel like the carrot tops just need a little bit more vibrancy. So I'm just gonna put in some yellows. That's saffron yellow. So I had used dry brushing to add in some yellow, which gave it a nice subtle tone, but sometimes you need something a little bit more aggressive. So yeah, I like that a little bit better. And then this is bright yellow. You can come back over the saffron in places and just give it a bit more brightness. Yeah. And that will dry darker, of course. So the other thing you can do, if you want these lines to be darker, you can come in with a liner and a brown and just come in and do some lining, and I might give that a try, see if I like it. So I'm gonna try a bit of dark chocolate. Just to do a bit of lining.
So that completes our bunny butt in the truck art project. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it or learned something from it. And again, this project will be available, the wood will be available in my Etsy shop, Teawife Creations, and I will provide a link for the information to my Etsy shop at the end of this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. This is Kathy McAllister, the Tea Wife, signing out. See you next time.